Congressman Kevin Brady of Texas returns to the Washington Journal this morning. He's been thinking a lot about jobs, and we're going to talk to him this morning about his thoughts on how Washington can have an effective role in job creation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Susan, for having me.
You heard a little bit of our last conversation about Apple CEO Steve Jobs and employing 46,000 people in this company, revenues that grew by tens of billions each of this last successive 3 years. What lessons can we have from America's success in the IT world, technology world, to apply to job creation as a whole in this country?
You know, I think some lessons from it. One is there is no substitute for the drive of an American entrepreneur. You know, I don't think the government would have or could have created the iPad, the iPod, have transformed music, entertainment like that one individual did. The lesson, too, is he had a country and a tax code that encouraged investment in young, untried, but dynamic people like himself. And he had an opportunity in this country to be able to market, to go up against the big boys, to be able to transform an industry, you know, without necessarily asking for government handouts along the way. He really drove it. And I think it's, Susan, a little ironic on the day we lose such a iconic genius entrepreneur that Washington proposes a surtax on successful people like him, a sort of success tax on those who have and worked and risked and generated so many jobs. To me, there just seems to be a disconnect on that issue.
His company held more than 300 patents, and we had a caller who said he'd like to be a Steve Jobs too, but the process of patent application is cumbersome and expensive in this country, and access to capital is challenging in this economy.
It is in this economy, no question about it. And our patent process needs to be reformed. We really went from a state-of-the-art system to, I think, lagging behind our global competitors. It is easier and quicker, and I think less litigious to do it in other countries. I'm hopeful the new patent reform that passed helps some in that area. I am told it will. But it really goes to the heart of it. I don't think anyone ought to be discouraged by these processes, whether you're trying to bring a new medical breakthrough to the marketplace or new technology breakthrough. But there's no question we can do it, can streamline it much better at the federal level.
I'm going to open up the phone lines and our Twitter account here and our email lines if you would like to engage in conversation with Congressman Kevin Brady, Vice Chairman of the Joint Economic Committee in the House of Representatives, and our topic is jobs in the economy. Republicans 202-737-0002, Democrats 202-737-0001, Independents 202-628-0204, and we welcome your participation in our discussion this morning. The chairman of the Federal Reserve was on Capitol Hill, and one of the topics of conversation with the committee was the role of the Fed in jobs creation.
Yeah.
You spoke about that. I listened to an interview you gave to Bloomberg News afterwards saying that this is something you'd like to change. Explain why.
I really would. One, the Fed plays an important role in our economy, but it really should be focused on, and their appropriate role is keeping prices stable. Avoiding inflation or deflation. That actually is what they can do over time, and probably one of the strongest foundations for economic growth. Changing the money supply, expanding it or contracting it, doesn't spur job growth and output except for a very short burst. And I really think the Fed is trying to do too much. I think most of the hindrances to our economy are on the fiscal side. Really the talk of higher taxes, a higher debt, regulation that isn't balanced. Those are the real, I think, factors that hold our economy and recovery back. So I would like to see us go to a single mandate, keep prices stable. That really is what most of the world has moved to for their central banks. I actually think for growth and the economy long term, that's the role the Fed should play.
One of your colleagues on the committee, Congressman Mick Mulvaney of South Carolina, asked Chairman Bernanke about this dual role. Here is his response. Let's show our audience what he said.
Well, Congressman, it's a complicated question. I can't answer it real quickly. I would say that we do have some ability to improve the employment situation, and I think the dual mandate has worked pretty well on average over time. I would also point out that central banks that have inflation as their primary or technically only mandate, do pay attention to economic conditions, if for no other reason that affects inflation expectations. So I think our dual mandate is workable, although I agree that in the long run, only thing the Fed can control is inflation. In the long run, low inflation is the best thing we can do for growth. I agree with all that. So my bottom line is I think we can make the dual mandate work. I think it's worked pretty well. But of course, it's up to Congress. If you want to change to a single mandate, we will do whatever you assign us to do.
Reaction?
Listen to the last part of his discussion. It's workable, but in the long run, all that the Fed can do is control inflation. And in the long run, keeping inflation low creates strong economic growth. In other words, I will do what Congress tells me to do and will be held accountable for it. I can make these dual mandates work, but in the long run, keeping prices low is really what we do. And I think, again, the Fed's going to do follow the mandates Congress lays out. And you've got right now two very good mandates, employment, full employment, and price stability. But when they're equally important, they also create conflicts.
In what ways? Examples?
Interest rate would be a good example. If you want to slow down, if an economy is becoming superheated, inflation is growing, obviously you raise interest rates, it slows the economy down. But it also, if you do the reverse, you can drive inflation up. At the time you're trying to increase jobs, which is what the case is today. You know, they lowered the interest rate to nearly zero in the hopes of spurring economic recovery. But that also tends to create inflation, which is, again, one of the cruelest taxes you have and another drag on the economy. And so you have, at times, two very important mandates that are exactly in policy conflict to each other. And I think our global competitors have learned that price stability really is either the primary or the sole goal of their central banks, and I think they're right.
Let me get another topic on the table here. The Senate right now is in the middle of a debate about the Chinese currency. And I'm wondering, given the trade imbalance between China and the United States, the number of jobs that have been exported to China, including in Apple, we talked a lot about that with callers the last time, what you think about the United States having a voice in the Chinese currency valuation?
You know, I think no question, trade deficit and the imbalance between the U.S. and China is a real issue. The currency is a real issue, but I think Congress has made a mistake by looking at China only through the prism of currency, because it is key to a segment of the American economy, but the trade barriers that China has erected to the broader range of American companies trying to compete over there, from intellectual property rights to directed subsidies, a capital flow, capital count that's controlled, to their manipulation of rare and raw export materials. All of those are barriers that I think have a much greater impact on our trade deficit, and my concern is not only will this be counterproductive, it won't be effective, and probably makes it harder to tear down the broader range of trade barriers. So I'm pleased Speaker Boehner made the point that we need to look at China in a broader relationship. He's exactly right.
Got a lot of callers lined up for you, so let's get to our viewers' calls, beginning with Potomac, Maryland. This is, tell me your name, please. Misha, is that right? Potomac?
Yes, Mayor from Potomac.
Mayor, excuse me. Democrat, you're on the air.
Yes, I was calling to make a comment about what the congressman said about taxing the entrepreneurs, and that is not what...
You still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
Yeah, finish your thought. We can hear you.
Yes, I was, like I said, I was not calling. I'm calling to say that Mr. Obama is not asking to tax the entrepreneurs who are creating jobs, but individuals who are making easy money on Wall Street by influence and people who are like hedge fund managers. And there are lots who are making over $1 million who are not creating any jobs. They are doing it, they're making personal gains and wondering whether to buy a bigger boat or a smaller boat. And those people definitely need to be taxed. And I feel that the Republicans are not giving Mr. Obama any slack because their mandate is primarily to make sure that he's a one-time president, and that is very unfair.
All right, thank you for your call.
Great, two thoughts. And on the second one, Republicans are very willing to work with the president on real jobs issues. For example, right now we're moving 3 very important trade and sales agreements with Colombia, Korea, and Panama that can create 250,000 new jobs, where we can sell $13 billion of new sales to new customers in these 3 countries. So when the president creates and puts out jobs bills that we believe actually can create private sector jobs, we're more than willing to work with, in fact, eager to work with the president on those. A couple thoughts, too. I'm so glad that we are continuing to fight the notion that government determines what value you are to society, what types of jobs you have, and whether that is whether you're contributing or not. Truth of the matter is, we have one of the most progressive tax codes in the world. For example, our top 1% of wage earners shoulder almost 40% of the burden of federal income taxes. So they're paying their fair share plus more. The higher income earners pay an effective tax rate 3 times greater than the middle class, and that's exactly the opposite. I think the president's getting very bad information in that area. And when he talks about the Buffett rule and those who in the pro-growth tax brackets are paying just 15% on capital gains, the numbers show that's not accurate either. About 63% of the income for those in those higher tax brackets are from normal income, salaries and earnings like you and I have. So I think it's a huge mistake to create another success tax on the pro-growth workers and businesses in America, like Steve Jobs. And I also think it won't make a dent in this deficit. So we just see the issue much differently. Well,
this Twitter comment connects our earlier discussion with tax, and it's from Russell Vaughn, who writes, please ask Representative Brady what the tax rates were in the 80s when Steve Jobs started Apple. Hint, much higher. Yeah. Thankfully, we had, though, a tax code that encourages investment in people like Steve Jobs. That's one of the reasons capital gains is taxed at a lower rate, while we've encouraged that entrepreneurship. And the exact wrong thing to do would be to increase tax. I think the president's proposed much higher taxes on capital gains, investment, and dividends. Again, I think would be a terrible mistake. The other thing that's happened in the 80s and 90s is government actually shrank. Over those 20 years, shrank the size of government. We generated 37 million new jobs, but as government has grown, we're actually 2.5 million jobs short. So the other part of that, along with the tax code, is let's create a government that actually encourages in size private sector growth. Bill is watching us in Las Vegas. Republican, you're on the air.
Hi. I'm a social conservative, but upon analysis of the healthcare system, I am wondering if there's been any independent studies done of the impact that nationalized healthcare would have on job growth or job reduction. I understand we have 18% gross national product going to healthcare. I was in Peru, and it's only 5% down there, 10% in Canada, and even though I agree with almost everything that the Republican Party stands for, I'm starting to change my mind about the health care. Is there any independent studies done that could help us get more understanding of where the jobs will be created in the future?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. There is. The Congressional Budget Office, independent of Republicans, Democrats, have estimated that the president's new health care law will lose 800,000 American jobs by the end of the decade because the cost that it imposes and the shifts that it imposes as well. And I know with small businesses and listening back home, as they ponder the cost of this new health care law, they're reluctant to go above the 50 workers that would trigger them into this health care law. I think the cost, because this bill really didn't focus on the cost of health care and controlling that, making it more affordable. I'm convinced a number of businesses right now, especially those, I'd say 250 workers or above, are looking seriously at dropping their health care plans, moving them, paying the fine, moving them into the exchanges which means you and I as taxpayers are going to pay more and more for others' health care. And at the end of the day, that's going to be a drag on our economy.
Our next telephone call is from Atlanta. Good morning to Margaret, Independent.
Yes, I have a couple questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Number one, why can't we pass President Obama's job bill and have an even, I think his taxing was just to pay for that jobs bill, if I'm not mistaken. Last night I did watch the thing that you were talking about for the trade. I've been unemployed since November of 2010. I have been looking every day. I'm signed up with 10 temp agencies. I'm an administrative. But what you're passing is good for farmers and manufacturers, but it's not going to get me a job as an administrator. I'm 50 years old. I have worked every day of my life since I was 14 years old.
Margaret, how are you supporting yourself right now?
Fortunately, my husband, which should be retiring, cannot, so we only have one income in this house, and my son and I are both laid off.
Thanks for your call, and good luck to you.
Well, Margaret, unfortunately, you're not alone. We have 25 million Americans today who are either can't find a job, can't work full-time, or frankly have just given up. Our unemployment figure really is closer to 16% than it is to 9% in the real world, and what troubles me is we've got the fewest number of workers in the workforce than in a quarter of a century. Those are pretty troubling numbers. I think it's also a reason why the president actually is working together with the Republicans on these new sales agreements, because they can create 250,000 new jobs in America because we're finding new customers for our companies, and the companies you're hoping will hire you are in manufacturing, technology, in services, and so it's important that we find those customers to support jobs we hope you'll get. The other thing we could do, I'm convinced, is we leave almost 1 million American jobs on the table by not letting our American energy companies fully work in the Gulf of Mexico, along the coast, in Alaska. These are good paying jobs as well. There's some good things we can do and are willing to work with the president on, but they have to create real jobs along Main Street, permanent ones, not temporary government jobs. I think that's been a mistake the last 2 years.
As you know, last night the Democratic Senate leader unveiled their latest proposal, which is to make it truly a millionaire's surtax, people over $1 million, to pay for the president's jobs bill. I'd like you to talk about both the economics and also the politics of that.
I think probably the hope is this is good politics for next November. It's terrible economics, and it's not a serious debt proposal. From the economic standpoint, again, a success tax on the entrepreneurs that work the hardest, pull themselves up by the bootstrap, risk, oftentimes fail, go in debt to do it, work ungodly hours to create that success, I think is a mistake. Secondly, creates almost no revenue to speak of to tackle this deficit. So I think it's more a political gambit than a serious issue. And my guess is it's dead on arrival in the Senate, certainly is in the House, because it's not a serious economic proposal.
It does provide enough over 10 years to offset the president's job plan, doesn't it?
Well, but the president came through with $1.5 trillion of taxes, 3 times what his jobs plan proposed. And at the end of the day, I'm unconvinced that his jobs plan will really create jobs. So we're going to raise taxes with, I guess I'm a little discouraged that we continue to raise taxes or seek to raise taxes on jobs we never get from these stimuluses that never occur.
This comment from CSpan Junkie on Twitter goes back to the interest rate discussion. Writes, by keeping interest rates so low, Americans become negative savers, massively in debt. Writes, savings spur growth. See China as an example.
I agree. I think, in fact, if we had a 5% savings rate in America, we wouldn't have a trade deficit with China or any other country for that matter. Low interest rates also, I think, mask the true cost of America's deficit. You know, if we were at the average interest rates that the country normally pays, we would be in deficit another between $500 billion and $1 trillion a year. And so I think I am worried about keeping these interest rates so low for so long, both for savers, the fear that it will create another bubble down the road. Those are real concerns.
Next is Port Richey, Florida. This is Andy, a Democrat there. Good morning, Andy.
Yeah, good morning. just have to say, I was a rescue worker at the World Trade Center.
Wow.
And I have quite a few illnesses from down there. And I don't believe in your health plan.
Which health plan is that,
I could
Andy?
die. If I got a $6,000 voucher to go to the doctor with, I can't hear you. So, just let me finish talking.
Yes, sir.
Please, sir.
And
Your health plan will only pay for one visit to the doctor for me. And, I was watching the Tea Party. They had a rally, and they had the president on a picture dressed like a witch doctor. I thought that was really funny. There's no racism there, though. That's all I have to say.
okay, thank you.
I'm not certain.
Sure
the reason I had asked about the health care plan, your health care plan, I wasn't certain what Andy was referring to. One, I need to thank you for your service at the World Trade Center and Ground Zero, and that will never be forgotten. Secondly, I do disagree with the premise that the Tea Party is somehow racist. Clearly, there's elements in every party that are extreme, but I know in our communities, our Tea Party, these are just average people who are worried about how deep in debt the country is, how big the government has grown, and want to make sure they and their kids have greater individual rights and freedoms than they fear will occur if we stay on the current path. They're really good people, and they don't deserve the description of racists or terrorists or any other. They're just average people trying to get involved, and I think that's very healthy.
Read on the internet that you have a primary challenger from someone who is representing the Tea Party in your district. How will someone who says you're a good guy but you're not conservative enough for the mood of the country affect how you campaign this year?
In Texas, there's always someone who thinks you're not conservative enough. We're one of the major conservatives in the major conservative delegation in Texas. 100% pro-life voting record, 95% lifetime conservative record. There's just no room on the right to run into. This is a common theme. We had primary opponents last time around, said exactly the same thing. But we have a proven track record as a conservative. And so we're proud of that in the fight we're putting up today in the last number of years on bigger government, higher taxes, and again, a growing government intervention we think exactly matches our constituents in our district.
And let me follow up with this Twitter comment, actually, from Spoonie, if I can get it up here quickly enough. First thing I hear out of Representative Brady is lower taxes. No one ever decided to start a business or invent something on the basis of taxes.
I would disagree. And if you talk with small businesses today, taxes are a major part of what they pay and does enter into those decisions. Moreover, higher taxes make it very hard for American companies to manufacture and stay in the United States. Intel's a great example. One of a major manufacturer for America has made the decision to build manufacturing here in the United States near their R&D, near their innovation. But they pay almost $1 billion premium for locating that plant here in America, hiring American workers because of our tax code. And so I would disagree. I think our tax code is very discouraging of American job creation, and other countries have taken a page from our playbook, low taxes, balanced regulation, skilled workforce, and are beating us, unfortunately, in the global marketplace. That's one of the reasons we need to change our tax code, allow us to be far more competitive than we are today, and encourage companies, whether they are starting out, mid-sized or major companies, to locate those jobs in plants here in the United States.
Bowie, Maryland is next. Fred, Republican there. Good morning.
Good morning, CSpan. Mr. Brady, I have a comment for you. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
I'm a foreigner. I've been in this country for 15 years, and for the past 10 years, I've been a Republican, and I've been faithful. But, you know, I'm really disappointed in what you guys are doing, because it appears that you only care about your job. If you find yourself in a situation where you don't have a job, then you know that it's very important to support the president's proposal. You know, everything he has proposed, these are the things that the Republicans will like to do. You know, most of 95% of this proposal are tax cuts for, you know, small business, and this is what the economy needs. I tell you something this morning. You know, the problem we have in this country is not because of taxation. The problem we have with jobs is because, look at China, it's the cost of production, especially the cost of labor. You know, an average factory worker in America earns about $45,000 to $65,000 in a year. In China, it's about $15,000. That's why companies will take their job there, because of cheap labor. So you need to stop talking about taxation. We need to increase our revenue in this country. We're not going to solve this problem only by cutting. Cutting means when you cut funding, you are cutting jobs. You're cutting jobs. So until you find yourself in that situation where you don't have a job, then you know what it means. When a man wakes up in the morning, they don't know how they're going to have breakfast or lunch or dinner, then you will know. So you guys need to work with the president. If you don't do that,
Fred, let's get a response here.
No, I was just going to ask, may I ask if you're still on the line, tell me about the president's job proposal and what, like a provision that will help create jobs for small businesses.
He hung up at that point.
Okay,
I
I'm
apologize.
sorry. Because we're searching for that within that jobs proposal. And one point you made that needs to be sort of expanded, yes, some countries have a definite wage advantage over America, but we have a remarkable productivity advantage over many countries because of technology, because of a skilled workforce. You know, our manufacturing productivity has grown dramatically faster than many of the countries that we compete with. An example is a plant that built widgets in 1955 might have 1,000 workers to build those widgets. Because of technology, today it takes 184 workers in America to do the exact same job. Technology has advanced this dramatically, and so the wage cost isn't as important as the productivity cost, and America is very good in that area, which is why a lot of companies now are looking at a very punishing tax code that just makes it harder to keep these jobs in America. And I also believe we've gotten away from having the best business climate in the world for new jobs. I think until we restore that, we're not going to see the jobs along Main Street that people are just so hungry for.
The President has had an open press conference to a schedule today that will happen at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Of course, our cameras will cover that. This is a comment by Twitter from JAH08, who writes, "Can Representative Brady cite a period when long-term growth and broad prosperity was a consequence of low taxation and deregulation?"
You know, I think if you look from the 1980s through the 1990s, you saw a period where the government at the federal level reduced itself in size, almost 4 percentage points. Started with President Reagan, worked its way again through President Clinton. And during that period, while we shrunk the size of government, we also created 37 million new jobs. When we began to grow more as a government in 2001, the attacks of 9/11, and through the current president, we actually lost 2.5 million jobs. The tax code, I think, is critical to encouraging job production. I think a government that lives within its means and is not too large to stifle growth is important to job creation. And I question whether increasing taxes, whether it's on small businesses, professionals, or the future Steve Jobs of the world, is going to jumpstart our economy. I've yet to find someone who thinks, yeah, let's discourage more of their activity. That will really help, especially among tax brackets who happen to be some of our best consumers. In fact, they're outsized consumers at a time when demand does matter.
Congressman Brady's other committee assignment in the House is Ways and Means, the tax writing committee in Congress. Before coming to the House of Representatives, he spent 6 years in the Texas House. He also was an 18-year executive of the Chamber of Commerce, and he's a graduate of the University of South Dakota. Just a couple more minutes left with him. Next is Houston, Texas. Kathy, Democrat.
Yeah, I wish we had a free market. My son's in the military. Let me tell you a little bit something, okay? My son didn't join the military so he could fight for Karzai and die for lies in Iraq. And my jobs are sent to China. Wall Street robbed my pension. My government doesn't want to pay its bills. We have $1 trillion in student loans, and yet I'm hearing how uneducated we are. Nobody in Congress works for America. They think their job is giving my job to China, India, or Mexico, while my kids are going to be slaughtered for the Bush family, which, by the way, Jonathan Bush has security through Abu Ghraib, and he has the cybersecurity for spying on Americans. In case nobody knows, we don't have news. Somebody better send a grievance counselor to CNN. They're still worried about Casey Anthony.
Thank you, Kathy.
Frustrated American.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you hear from a lot of people that sound like her?
No, not exactly like that at all. What I do hear, people are worried about the economy, and at least back home. Our folks are worried about the economy, and they're very worried about the debt. They just see a country that can't seem to get its financial house in order, and they're very concerned about what that's going to do for their family, what kind of drag, what kind of burden their kids and grandkids are going to carry around with them in the future. And those are legitimate concerns that Washington really isn't addressing.
Jobs report is out again tomorrow. Economists are already predicting it will stay steady at about 9.1%. What are you thinking a year from now people can expect?
You know, consensus for tomorrow is about 60,000 net gain, non-farm payroll, which is a very weak number. It'd be different if it was 2 months into the recovery. We're more than 2 years into the economic recovery. Every blue chip indicator in the Fed have lowered their economic growth forecasts going forward, and so it looks like it is going to be a tough slog. One thing that worries me, and we talked with Chairman Bernanke at the Fed this week about it, is that nearly half of all countries that go through a financial crisis like we did go into a double-dip recession within the first 3 years, often in an unrelated issue. America's economy, if we were flying at 50,000 feet steady and strong, it'd be one thing. We're flying very low, very slow, and the European financial crisis, should it occur, has a chance, that turbulence has a chance to move us down into a double-dip recession. One of the arguments Republicans have made from day one is that we need to have a very strong economic recovery so we're not weak at a point where other countries oftentimes dip down into a double-dip recession. That's got to be, that's not necessarily good news, but we know it's there, and I think we ought to take the steps, all the steps we can to strengthen, fly this U.S. economy higher than it is today in case Europe goes a direction we hope it doesn't.
Thank you for being here again this morning. That's it for our time.
Thank you, Susan.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be joined by Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, a member of the Appropriations Committee. We'll be right back.